Welcome to DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I've been doing quite a few videos about Ravenloft, The Horrors Within, the new Ravenloft book, doing videos during its release and even before its release. And one aspect I've really wanted to talk about is in regards to the Tarokka cards and the Tarokka deck, and how there's information in the book about how to run Tarokka readings for people. I'm a big fan of Tarokka. It's the highlight, in my opinion, of Curse of Strahd, and in the domain hopping Ravenloft sequel campaign I've been running for my players. Plus, I've got 3 DM's Guild products as I record this, and they are all Tarokka themed. I've even got both all the old and the new decks. You can see here I've got the old Seer card and the new Seer card. But I've seen people say, why did Wizards of the Coast put out a new Tarokka deck? Well, firstly, I'm pretty sure the old one is out of print now, as far as I know, but Curse of Strahd remains really popular. And secondly, it's a cool accessory with a lot of in-game potential. And in The Horrors Within, they give advice and some mechanics on how to use it in your game. More so than what was in Van Richten's guide, the original 5th edition Ravenloft book. So I'm going to go through what it says, talk about it, and do some example draws. First, what is Tarokka? Best way to describe it is it's D&D's in-universe tarot cards. In Curse of Strahd, spoilers for Curse of Strahd, the players can have a Tarokka reading that leads them to various MacGuffins around the land and a fated ally, and it determines where the main villain Strahd will be in his castle for the finale. And in The Horrors Within, there's 2 main aspects: how the cards tie into different domains and their Darklords, and just general guidance on running a Tarokka reading. For the first part, we don't go to the appendix section all about the Tarokka, we actually go to the start of Chapter 2, Domains of Ravenloft. And there's 2 subsections there under the Tarokka and the Mist section. Tarokka Mist Talismans. Mist Talismans are like divining rods that can be used to choose to go to a domain of dread rather than, say, ending up there randomly. And if a card is drawn while in the mists, it tells us that it can lead the players to a certain domain. When flicking through the book, each of the 16 major domains, those are the ones, I call them major domains, they're the ones that have multiple pages of information each. They say what card it is in their intros, but if it's easier, there's a table, an Other Domains of Dread table, that shows all of the domains and all cards tied to all the domains. And I got the cards here. It's awkward to shuffle when you have a microphone in your face. I'm going to do a test draw, 2 test draws, and see what domain we get. I got a feeling it doesn't cover every card. I think the 4 master cards, I think, are the main card of each suit isn't there. And I think only one of the high deck cards is there, but we're going to... I'm also keep hitting my mic. This is fun. I got Elementalist. Can you see Elementalist? Oh, look how pretty that is. Elementalist. So if they draw the Elementalist card while they are in the mists, they would go to Skaina, which is one of the minor domains. I don't know it very well, and I've never run it. Let's try it again. Try to do it while it's on camera, so you know I'm not just cheating this and not doing any cheeky edits. And this is the Raven card. I'm going to dismiss that one because I'm pretty sure Raven card isn't done. Neither is Mists. Neither is Tempter. Neither is Artifact. I've not shuffled these very well, have I? I'm getting all the high deck cards. Torturer. I think I know what this one is. I think it's the Shadowlands. Yes, it's the Shadowlands. So if you draw the Torturer card, you get drawn to the Shadowlands. Funnily enough, that's where my players are right now in my home game. And some of them have 2 options. So if you draw Thief, you could end up in either Rishamelo or Sea of Sorrows. If you draw Charlatan, you can choose either Dementlieu, or maybe roll a d4, and a 1 or 2 is Domain A, and a 3 or 4 is Domain B. But Dementlieu or Risibelos, if that's how it's pronounced, it probably isn't. Hang on, there's a domains pronunciation table somewhere. Risibelos, I think. So there you go, that's quite cool. You draw the cards, you end up in those places. It's a bit bad if you keep drawing cards repeatedly and don't get a result. Do you just say, it doesn't take them anywhere, and you just go to a domain of your choosing? I guess that's easier as well for prep. One of those things that I would do if it was like at the end of a session, rather than like in the middle of a session, because then you might not know anything about that domain. You might have to just homebrew on the spot until the domain ends, or maybe just put some random encounters in the mist or something. There's also a Darklords and the Tarokka section. Basically says that there's a Tarokka card that opposes each domain of dread, one hinting at the truth of the domain's Darklord. And if it's drawn during a Tarokka reading in that domain, the domain's Darklord becomes aware of the reading's participants. When it occurs, the Darklord can choose to see through the eyes of the Tarokka user and speak through them for a minute. Darklord might make their presence known, level a threat, or misinterpret the cards. A Tarokka reader has no memory of what a Darklord uses them to say. And the cool thing is you could potentially have this as like the players don't know that this card, the significance of this card and what this card means. Maybe they don't know if it's the Dark Lord that's saying it. Maybe they think it's just something or someone else. You could have a lot of fun with this, I think, potentially. I'm not going to do a test draw this time like I did with the other one, because it's not the kind of thing where you just draw a card randomly and say, oh, wow, it's this domain and this Dark Lord. It happens during an actual reading. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a reading later. And if one of the cards comes up, then we will see. But it's a small chance given how many of the cards there are, and it's like a 1 in 54 chance or something like that. Maybe more, because I think there's additional cards you can add. But we'll see. It'd be a funny coincidence if it does. I'm not going to rig it. I'm not going to stack the deck. I'm going to draw live in front of you, hopefully without any edits, so you can see for yourself. But I will discuss a few examples. So if we go back to that table, so as well as the aligned Tarokka card used as a mist talisman, there's also an opposed Tarokka card in the table. And to give a few examples, the opposite of Falkovnia is Executioner. So if the Executioner card gets drawn during a reading in Falkovnia, Vladeska, the Dark Lord, is aware of it. Or Ghost for Hazlan. So if you draw the Ghost card, Hazlik, the Dark Lord of Hazlan, is aware. Most of the info in the book about Tarokka is in the appendix section called the Tarokka deck. Right at the end of the book, it talks about its composition and what the suits mean. So there's 40 common deck cards, 10 for each suit, 4 suits altogether. And there's 14 high deck cards as well. It also talks about how you can use regular playing cards instead of a Tarokka deck if you don't actually have the official Tarokka deck. It then gives an example Tarokka reading you could do. And I actually did an impromptu Tarokka draw during my Ask Me Anything live stream 3, which was tying in with the release of The Horrors Within. We kind of had to flick through and talk about the book. It was a struggle though, but that was because I didn't read all the guidance properly. So this time I'm going to try and follow that guidance more closely. So the big thing is that the first card is actually chosen by a player to best represent the focus of the reading. And then you draw 4 of the cards. You don't draw 5 cards at random, you draw 4, and then you tie those 4 cards to the main focus card. It's quite hard to do. A lot of it requires on quick thinking and improv, which is something I'm not very good at. I shouldn't admit that as a DM. That's a really bad trait to have as a DM, but it's true. But The Horrors Within does give some guidance and advice on how to interpret the cards, which is really useful. And I'm going to cherry pick some of the useful advice it gives elsewhere in this section of the book. I nearly overlooked this. It says if a high deck card appears during a reading and it contradicts the prediction of an earlier card, assume this card takes precedence. So one card could be ignored in favor of a different card potentially. The fortune teller might remain silent on certain points. So if you're thinking, you draw a card and you're like, I have no idea how to interpret this. Maybe the fortune teller's like, I don't know what this means. And, you know, the players hopefully won't think that you're a bad fortune teller. Hopefully they'll think, wow, okay, that's ominous. And maybe you can think of something later, which is another point I'm going to talk about in a second. There's multiple ways to interpret cards instead of just the card itself. So if you draw a card and it's the shepherd card, and you think, what the heck's a shepherd got to do with things? There's other ways to interpret it. So examples it gives is the suit. If it's a sword or star or coin or glyph card, or if it's a high deck card which has a crown on it. The imagery of the card, so potentially the number of objects on the card, the position of the figures. If you get more of one suit, so if you draw like 3 coins cards, that could be significant, more than the individual cards themselves. The seer could say, I've seen this before in a past reading, and that might make the players think, oh, you know, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Maybe it was a bad thing that it appeared in a previous reading, and maybe they can say, off the cuff, you could say, oh, in this previous reading I did, it meant this. It can foreshadow events, so you might then think, I'm going to include a monster or an encounter that ties into what I've just drawn. And the seer can ask questions to get players thinking if it ties to a past event. So you might draw a card and think, oh, that reminds me of when we ran this other domain of dread. And through the seer, you might say, oh, you know, does this remind you of anything? And hopefully your players will say, oh, it reminds us of when we went to this domain of dread kind of thing. It doesn't say this in The Horrors Within. This is something I just thought of myself. But I've seen some people say with tarot cards, if you draw them normally, the meaning is good and it's precise. But if you draw the card upside down, the meaning could be bad, or it could mean the opposite of what the card means. So that could be another thing you can consider as well. It says if you're unsure about a card, have it manifest in the future. So for example, the example it gives is if it's the 4 of Glyphs, the shepherd card, if that appears in a reading, its imagery might appear later as a shepherd NPC, a hooked staff, a wandering sheep, 4 runes, and so on. And it also says to listen in on players' speculations about the meaning of the Tarokka cards and then use those suggestions to influence future revelations in your adventures. Players love being right when they guess stuff, and they might think that you had it planned all along, that that's what the meaning of the card was, when really what happened was they said, oh, I think this card means this, and you're like, That's really good. Make a note. I was about to do the example draw and I just realized I forgot to say what the cards actually mean. So I'm going to go back and do that before I do the draw. So the first card is the focus card. So that's the one that's chosen. It's kind of like the focus, how the other cards are interpreted. Card 2, the past. Something that might or might not be apparent to those other than the focus. Position 3, what opposes the focus, whether literal opponents or obstructing fortunes. Position 4, the future, an omen of what's to come and a fate that might still be changed. Position 5, what aids the focus, whether literal allies or advantageous events. So I'm going to use Falkovnia as an example and say that maybe they get a reading from a Vistana in Falkovnia. You know, it's about Vladeska. Maybe they want to know more about Vladeska, who they may or may not know is the Darklord, and they'll know she's the leader of the domain at least. And kind of that'll be the focus. So let's say the card that ties to that domain is Dictator. So I'm going to try and quickly find it and put it to one side. Hello, it's Steve from the future. I don't know why that makes me a ghost, apparently. I wanted to quickly insert this in after recording and then editing the video. You'll see that I struggle with the readings, especially parts of the first one and the beginning of the second one. And I was really thinking of re-recording it and redoing it, but I'm not for 2 reasons. Firstly, it feels inauthentic to re-record it. You know, I wouldn't get a do-over if I was doing it in front of my players. Why should I have a do-over with you guys? And I think it's wrong that if I re-record it and get a really good reading and then you guys do it, you might think, oh, Steve did it so well and I'm doing it badly. It doesn't seem very fair. And I think it also reinforces the point that it's nice to have this stuff in the book. I think I make this point later on, but I think it's great that we have this stuff in the book, but it's hard. You got to think on your feet. You got to improvise. You know, the book gives some guidance, but it's not like in Curse of Strahd with Madame Eva's drawer where it's all laid out and do this, then read this, then say this, etc. So that's why I haven't re-recorded them. It's also only halfway through the second reading that I remembered about the actual card meanings at the end of the appendix Tarokka reading chapter. So there's that as well, and you'll notice that as soon as I discover that, it gets a lot easier because it kind of opens up more thinking of ways to tie it all in. I'm also saying this because I don't want people clicking off and thinking, wow, Steve sucks at this sucks. Maybe I'm being too hard on myself. And I feel like halfway through the second reading, things get really good and I come up with some really good ideas and it goes well. But if you just watch the first one and the beginning of the second one and think, yeah, I'm not going to watch any more, then it's a shame. So at least stick around to the middle of the second one or skip ahead to the second one, which I feel does come across a lot better. Another idea I had, which I don't think I say in the main video, is if you can, try and time it with the end of a session. So you lay out all 5 cards, you don't say anything about them, you just lay them all out. And then you can then go away and then ahead of the next session, whether that's a few days or a week away or whatever, you got tons of time then to interpret them. And then when you come back the next session, and then you got the cards out, you can say, this one means this one means this. And you've had a week or a few days to think about it. But in-game, it looks like the Tarokka reading giver has just come up with it there and then on the spot. So that could be a really tactical thing to do. Do it at the end of a session. Okay, back to the main video. Okay, card 2 is the past. So I'm going to draw these. Should give them a really good shuffle because of what happened last time. We had like 5 high deck cards in a row. Okay, the past card is Diviner. Ooh, okay. So what have we got on the Diviner card? Maybe there was a Vistana who came before and their fate is unknown. Maybe they were captured and killed by Vladeska. Maybe Vladeska ordered them to do a reading to try and figure out what the meaning of the zombie invasions were. Sorry, I should explain. Falkovnia is the domain where it's like a recurring zombie siege. And it's basically it's a zombie apocalypse domain, basically. So maybe she used the Diviner to try and help her work that out, and maybe something happened to them as a clue to her nature. This is the opposition. Conjurer. Oh, maybe some sort of conjuration wizard, or like, who could it be? I don't know. Somebody helps them with defeating her. Other clues could be there's a moon on the card. So it always happens when there's a new moon, not a full moon. So maybe something happens when there's the full moon and a conjurer comes and helps him and becomes an ally. Maybe like a wizard with conjuration spells, something like that. Although I guess that kind of, this is where it gets tricky, right? Because that was my instant thought, but that would surely be the aid card, and because that's literal allies. But it's something that obstructs the Dark Lord. Priest is the omen of what's to come, and the fate that might still be changed. Hard to tell from this card what to devise. Maybe let's go back to the guidance I said earlier. This might be the one where I take the Remain Silent card, and then maybe in the future they meet a priest when maybe they say you have to save a priest during the zombie siege, and that happens in the future, the next zombie siege. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with that. And then lastly, the aid card. Oops, and he dropped a card. It was actually one of those weird bloodstain cards that they've added that are new. Try not to just grab the main card. Ooh, Raven. Oh, where Raven helps them. One of the Keepers of the Fair that comes along. I'm going to help you. When my players did Falkovnia, they had a Were Raven ally, so that's really cool. I'm going to say that. Also, weirdly, I'm going to talk about it later, but I did a video talking about other uses for the Tarokka deck, and I had a feeling I drew the Raven card like 5 times in that video. So I've drawn it again. The Raven wants to be known. So there we have it. The focus was Dictator. The past was Diviner. The opposition was Conjurer. The future was Priest. And the focus was Raven. No, the aid was Raven. Man, this is hard. This is really hard. I'm not great at this stuff like this, but let's try it again. This time I'm going to try it with Dementlieu. Dementlieu is the domain of sort of like Cinderella style domain, but there's a Grand Masquerade once a week, and the Dark Lord there, Sidra de Honor, is a wraith who can disintegrate people. Oh, I've not actually seen her new stat block yet. I'm assuming she still has that aspect. I'm still thinking of when I ran it years ago with the auto-suggestion of Wraith with Disintegrate spell. This time, the focus isn't going to be Sidra. It's going to be the Grand Masquerade. And I think the best card to have as the focus card for that, if I can find it, is the, God, what's it called? Charlatan card. Which I know on the old version, somebody held a mask. So it's like a masked ball, essentially. Yes! And it still shows it. Look at this, look at this, look at this. It's like, that would be the focus card, so Charlatan. And I got to pay attention for if the Seer card gets drawn, that's the opposed card. But like I said, there's like a 1 in 50 odd chance of that happening, so I'm not holding my breath. Okay, card number 1. Merchant. Ooh, that could be a good one in a place like Dementlieu, because it's got a lot of shops. That's the past. Oh man, this is hard. Remain silent. I sound less like the meme in Skyrim, isn't it? Where if you play as the Dark Brotherhood person, like every time somebody talks to you, one of the options is remain silent. I'm going to remain silent on that one. Or do the whole thing where it's like, oh, I forgot to mention as well. At the end of the chapter, there's actual meanings of the cards. So what's the meaning of merchant? A rare commodity or business opportunity, deceitful or dangerous business transactions. Again, none of those spring out at me to do with the Grand Masquerade. Maybe they do for you. Let me know in the comments. So, remain silent. Card 3 is the opposition of the focus. Berserker. Ay, ay, ay. The meaning of Berserker, the brutal and barbaric side of warfare, bloodlust, those with a bestial nature. This is the opposition to the focus. So I remember the old information from Dementlieu said you could have were-rats, or maybe that was my own homebrew. Where I was going to add sewers and then have Jacqueline Montari's sister from Richemelo, and the whole thing about Richemelo is they're all were-rats, living in the sewers in Dementlieu. Maybe she's the opposition to the Grand Masquerade. So instead of being the opposition to the Dark Lord, maybe she's the opposition to them going. Maybe. Here we go. I'm cooking. Maybe they get a ticket to the Grand Masquerade, but one of the were-rats who lives in the sewers steals it. Boom, we're going with that. Now we're going somewhere. Right, that's 3 cards so far. So card 4 is the future. Trader. Okay, we've had merchant and trader, so I'd probably focus on something like that. Maybe there's a lot of shop theme going on. Maybe that would be something I would comment on. 2 coins cards, a trader and a merchant. That's heck of a coincidence, or is it? Commerce, smuggling, and black markets, fair and equitable trade. So when they catch up to the were-rats, oh, we already sold it for money. And then they know they got to get it as a trade, or maybe they trade for it. Maybe they just strike a deal with the were-rats and say, we'll give you it if you help us with something. That might work. That sounds good. I like that. And card 5, the aid of the... What aids the focus? Oh, that's a good point. I thought it was aid, no matter what it is, I thought it's aid the player, but the wording there is it aids... so this... so I was going to talk later about how there's a B&B Beyond blog post that also gives guidance on this. And it says that the aid foretells assistance that might help along the way, such as allies, magic items. I've just reread from The Horrors Within. It says this aids the focus. So I guess you could interpret it 2 ways, or maybe you want to be strict with it and just do the Horrors Within way. It's not necessarily something that aids the players. It could be that it aids the focus. When I did Vladeska in the previous reading, maybe it's actually an ally. It becomes an ally of Vladeska's, not necessarily the players. Might have that wrong though. Let me know what you think. But anyway, aid of this reading is... Well, we didn't guess Seer. That's a shame. Monk. Serenity, inner strength and self-reliance, supreme confidence bereft of arrogance. This is so hard. So what she's holding something in her hand. Maybe it's a magic item. Maybe it's a magic item that helps them get into the Grand Masquerade, as well as, or instead of, the ticket they had and lost and had stolen by the were-rats or something like that. So there we go. It's really hard. And I think that's my, like, I said something similar in my review video. I feel like this book helps DMs more with running adventures, domain hopping campaigns, etc. than the previous book did. And this has more information about Tarokka draws than the previous book did. But I don't know, I still feel like it's not giving enough to really help DMs. But I guess it's because the possibilities are endless. How could you put in a book like every single reading for every single circumstance for every single domain? It would be hard. So I was certainly happier with that draw than I was for the Falkovnia one. I felt like there was more I could work with. I was kind of almost like coming up with the ideas as I was drawing the cards. But obviously I was doing that from the perspective of brainstorming, or whatever the word is. Like, I was basically talking about it with you guys, you gentle reader, gentle viewer. Whereas if I was actually doing it in front of my players, I wouldn't be saying, whoa, were-rats, and whoa, you're going to have a trade. But then speak more sort of, I don't know, I guess it'd be something like, you know, drawing the, what was it, the Berserker card after seeing the meaning. Potentially something may happen. You may lose the ticket. I would check in the sewers. And the trader card, perhaps you need to make a trade in order to move forward. Things like that, you speaking more ominous tones rather than screaming, I've got an adventure idea off the back of this, which is the way I was kind of doing it just then. Before I finish up, I want to talk about a few other related things, one of which is who can give Tarokka readings. So traditionally it was the Vistani, and it does explain in the Horrors Within that the Vistani are the people who are the origin for Tarokka. The Vistani, just to explain, are travelers between the mists to different domains who invented Tarokka and like to do fortune telling. And what examples are there of Vistani? The most famous one perhaps is Madame Eva. She's the Vistana seer. So I bounce between Vistani and Vistana. Vistani's plural, Vistana's singular. She's the Vistana seer in Curse of Strahd, so she lives in Barovia. Esmeralda, also known as just Es for short, in the Ravenloft books. She's also in Curse of Strahd, and it does say that she can give a reading. Not strictly in the book, more of a homebrew suggestion is Arabelle, is a young girl who lives in Barovia, is in Curse of Strahd. She's a descendant of Madame Eva, so it doesn't say she can give readings, but I think it kind of makes sense to say she could as well. Mother Luba was a character introduced in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, who's a halfling, and she has a magic item tied to her, which I'll talk about later. Hiskoza, who's a male seer who had prophecies tied to him. And I invented one in one of my DM's Guild resources called Hedian Kolarash, although he might actually be Hiskoza in disguise. Oh ho ho. And an interesting thing now is it's not outwardly said, but it's implied that non-Vistani, or pretty much anyone, can give a Tarokka reading in the Horrors Within. Because there's a picture of a character called Orpheus Brindletop, who's a member of the Keepers of the Feather. And funny enough, he had art, I'm pretty sure it's the same guy, had art in Van Richten's Guide as well. Looks like the same dude. And he consults the Tarokka and is like, I'm going to just quickly look at the cards and have a think. So it doesn't have to be Vistani. It could be anyone who has access to a Tarokka deck. It could even be your players. If your players want to give it a go, that could be fun. It could be quite interesting. My players have access to a Tarokka card, and sometimes one of the players likes to draw a random card. If they're stuck on what to do, they draw a card to, come up with an idea. It's really cool. If you're looking for other uses for the Tarokka deck beyond what's in Curse of Strahd and now the Horrors Within. A while back, I did do an other uses video, and there's loads of resources people have done that, you can use the Tarokka deck to help come up with random encounters, or to give powers and abilities in battle, or just play games. There's a game that used to come with the Tarokka deck, the old one. There's other people who've done games. I think one of them's like Texas Hold'em style. Also, it's a great magic item. If you've got access to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there's a magic item called Luba's Tarokka of Souls, tied to Mother Luba, who I talked about earlier. I did a video all about it. It's one of those videos I was really proud of, but didn't get many views. And it's great. I added it to my Ravenloft campaign, and it's very powerful, but there's a side effect where it can release powerful monsters. And I even talk about changing the list, because the list was quite basic. I think it was like just monster manual monsters, and I give suggestions on what you could change them to have a sort of bigger spread and more variety. So feel free to check that out. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the second Tarokka reading, which is very similar to how the Horrors Within has Tarokka cards leading to different domains. This is a Tarokka reading you're given, similar to the one in Curse of Strahd, where it points people to MacGuffins and an ally in Barovia, but this time it points people to MacGuffins and an ally spread throughout all the domains of Dread. I think, it is cool to draw a Tarokka card and use it as a mist talisman and go to that domain. What I really like, and I know I'm biased because I made it, but what I really like about my approach is you can have the grandeur of an actual Tarokka reading, and I was drawing the cards in front of the players, and, the beast card, and what that means kind of thing. It was good fun. It was released before the Horrors Within, so it doesn't include Sithicus, Innsmay, or Caledney, which are the new domains they've added to 5th edition. But you could just say that if you draw the Paladin, Bishop, or Conjurer card, which are the aligned cards with those domains in the Horrors Within, then that could be another way to go to them. So that's how you could add Sithicus, Innsmouth, and Caledney to it if you want to do that. My other two Tarokka-themed DM's Guild products, Tarokka Featured Adventurers, basically means you use Tarokka cards to help you choose, or help your players choose, class and subclasses for the next one-shot or campaign. Although it was pre-5.5e, so it's kind of the older classes from the older books, but it should sort of correspond. Obviously, they're still releasing subclasses, so maybe in a couple of years' time, I'll do a 5.5e version properly. And the 3-pile Tarokka technique is just something that helps with the reading in Curse of Strahd. I've got more ideas for more Tarokka-themed DM skill products coming out in the future, so feel free to keep an eye. I think there's a thing you can tick on DM's Guild where you say, let me know if this person releases more products in the future. Or just keep an eye on subscribe to my videos and keep an eye on my videos, because I'll probably do demo videos about them. Please share your Tarokka tips. Feel free to do example readings and what you get and how you'd interpret them. I love all this stuff. Like, honestly, Tarokka, I just love the chaos and the randomness, and you draw a card and it can have a different meaning. I love that side of things. So feel free to just give me loads of comments with just example draws, and maybe we can interpret them together. And we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.